Hi Siri, I'm looking for a new podcast, one that preferably is hosted by a UF Hall of Famer, one that airs every weekday that would bring me everything I need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions. Siri, is there such a show?
Have you heard of Pod Up with Matthews in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any podcast platform?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? UF Hall of Famer Shane Matthews has a show every weekday. I'm going to go check it out tomorrow. Thanks, Siri.
Good morning. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the program, Pod Up with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. We got JC lined up, and then we'll have Mike Morgan from ESPN join us later in the program. Not a whole lot happening in the sports world right now.
Oh.
Jason, are you talking more hotline?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. There's not much happening last night in the sports world.
Oh, last night. I'm sorry. I did not hear that on your phone. Okay. Well,
unless I missed something. I mean, there's no baseball. There was NBA, but nobody cares about that. So
listen, QB, you can talk about. We're in the heart of the October month, and the football season is getting interesting. We're going to eventually start talking about the 14 playoff here soon. We've got in 2 weeks maybe one of the best weekends in the SEC we've had all season, probably the best weekend. And QB, damn it, I've heard everybody say that Florida's got no chance in this game. You guys have no memory. In 1997, Georgia was a 21-point underdog and smoked the Gators, okay? They smoked the Gators.
Who said that? I don't think that's fact.
What?
They were not 21 points.
Georgia was a 20.5. No, Georgia was a 20.5-point favorite. I was there. I saw the game. I saw it all. And I remember it. And I remember it because I went. And when I went, I saw a Georgia team that was the 3-touchdown underdog beat Florida. Georgia had the Gators outscore them something like, 150-30 going into that. And Jim Donnan was the coach for the Bulldogs, and Steve Spurrier was the coach for the Gators, and Georgia smoked them. And Georgia had no chance. Nobody was giving Georgia a chance in that game. So I'm not saying it will happen this time. I'm just saying there has been a precedent set in this particular game that every once in a while something weird could happen, and we've always talked about that. And if you're going to give me Florida in 23.5, I'm taking it right now. Right now. Give me the 23.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, anything can happen on any given day, but the odds are very, very slim. I will tell you that right now. I'm on record that I think Georgia's better than they were last year. I still believe that. Just because they sputtered against Kent State, just because they sputtered against Missouri, that means nothing. Every team that has won national titles and been very successful have those games, okay? So read what you want to read into it. Can there be an upset? Yes. Is it likely? No. I think you got a better chance of winning the lottery.
No, you don't. Come on. QB, listen. Why is Georgia better now than they were last year? I got to hear this. Why are they better now?
They're way better on offense than they were last year. Way better. They're more experienced on the offensive side of the ball. The defense is still damn good. It may not be as dominant and have as many NFL players, but I mean, I'm not a Georgia homer at all. It sucks for me to sit here and say this, but what makes you think they're not as good as they were last year?
I just saw that Georgia team last year, which was the first team in 40 years.
Okay. You're just going off maybe the last game you saw of them. But if you go and you watch how they played throughout the course of the year, they didn't dominate every game as a national title winner. That's my point. People have to put the whole picture. When you look at football teams, I can't tell you how many people have told me, "Oh man, Missouri had them beat." Okay, well if you go back and you watch the game, the first quarter, first half, Stetson had the ball slip out of his hands 3 times. They had scoops. I think a scoop and score, and they ran one down to the 3. Look, can Florida beat them? Yes. Do I think Florida will? No. I don't think anybody does. I mean, I can't tell you how many Florida fans I've talked to are scared that it's going to get so ugly that it's going to They going to hurt recruiting. It's going to hurt recruiting.
I want to go back.
This game will not hurt recruiting.
Can I go back to what you just said about Georgia not dominating everybody last year and how they weren't as good off? What? Did you just say that?
They were not very good on offense last year, JC.
Well, let me go through a little bit of some factual scores for you. 62-0,
right.
37-0, 34.
Wait. Tell me who they're.
34-7. Okay. I'm just going to read the scores. 45-0. 33-0, 48-7. They did beat Missouri 26-22. Auburn 42-10, 55-0. I mean, what? Oh, wait a minute. That was, I'm looking at last year.
That's this year, there, Chief.
No, Chief, it was not this year. They beat UAB 56-7. They beat South Carolina 40-13. They beat Vandy 62-0. They beat Arkansas 37-0. You're out of your mind. You just don't know. You just forgot about how good they were last year. What are you talking about?
They were very good. They're good.
They beat Auburn 34-10. They beat Kentucky 30-13. They beat Florida 34-7. They beat Missouri 43-6. They beat Tennessee 41-7. They beat Georgia Tech 45-0. And they lost to Alabama 41-24. But they were damn good last year, and they were better than they are this year. And that's why Florida's going to keep this game.
Well, that's your opinion. That's why we have sports talk shows. That's your opinion. I have my opinion. I think
you tell me they didn't blow out anybody? They blew out teams last year, QB. They blew them out.
I did not say that.
You said they did. You said they weren't as good offensively, and they didn't blow out teams.
They weren't. They weren't. Well, okay, so we could go back and we could find out. If you really want to do research, tell me how many defensive touchdowns they had last year. Go see how many times their defense scored. See, people don't realize. Okay, so people talk. Let's just go back to the Florida LSU game. Everybody's talking about the Gators scored 35. Gators didn't score 35. LSU gave them 7 because they fumbled a punt. There's things like that in a game that people forget about, okay? So my point is, whether they scored 50 against School X last year or 50 this year, we don't know how that is. I'm just telling you the body of work is they're better on offense this year than they were last year. That's what I'm telling you.
I don't know. Georgia beat Michigan 34-11. They beat Michigan 34-11. What was that? All defensive scores, QB, against Michigan?
I don't know. I don't have the box score in front of me, but I guarantee if you check on it, I guarantee you that they only had to go a short look. If you don't think, if you really think that Georgia was better last year offensively, you're crazy as hell.
QB, they had Zamir White, they had Edwards, they had Cook. They had Bennett.
I'm just okay. Look. We're wasting time here. You think they were better last year? I think they're better this year.
I'm backing up my argument. I'm backing up my argument.
Well, I'm backing up my argument because they're more. My eyes tell me they're better this year. Okay, that's all. I'm not worried about stats. Stats lie a lot. Okay, stats lie a lot. All right. This is from Daryl. He says, "Good morning, guys. Stetson Bennett is not a big-time quarterback, but he's the kind of quarterback you'd like to have on your team because he throws completions and gets the job done." Yeah, I like Stetson ever since he was inserted against Arkansas 2.5 years ago. The guy's a winner. He knows how to play the position. You can't teach that, and he's a lot of the reason why they've been successful there this year. All right, so JC, you think it's going to be a close game?
No, I think it's going to be inside of 24.
Just like. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. You already owe me 2 lunches because of Florida.
One lunch.
Yeah, you owe me 2 lunches. One for the Florida LSU game and one for LSU Ole Miss.
LSU Ole Miss? We bet on that?
Yes, we did.
Okay, we're going to McDonald's. All right.
That's fine. I won't eat there. I'll get it and give it to somebody. I hope we can keep this game close. That's all I'm thinking.
Of course. Look, I'm trying to be optimistic. I mean, I'm trying to give folks a reason to even watch it or show up. I mean, listening to you, we ought to just go ahead and move on to the next game. And by the way, as far as Jacksonville goes, here's one thing I don't understand on this whole conversation. Georgia has a home game. Florida has a home game. They both agreed to play in Jacksonville. When that agreement is over, the Gators can play their home game against Georgia on the moon. It doesn't matter. But Georgia wants to play it at home. But that doesn't mean Jacksonville has to be cut out of the situation. If the University of Florida said, we're going to go play Georgia in Jacksonville, they can do it. So just remember that. They won't do it because I agree with Buddy Martin in that it takes 2 teams to dance. That's true. But in this case, if the Gators want to play their home game against Georgia and Jacksonville, nobody's going to stop them from doing it because it'll be.
And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I know
you would. But I'm just saying, Jacksonville doesn't have to be cut out of this if Florida fans are so enamored with going to Jacksonville. Because Georgia fans are over it. I think Georgia is over it. They are going to move that game to Athens. That's just what's going to happen. You can, I'm sorry.
It's going to be home. It's going to be home and home. We are not going to play in Jacksonville.
Right, you're not. But you can if you want to. Is all I'm trying to say.
Daryl says, Shane, do you think we'll have a top 5 class? It's going to be close. It'll be right there. They'll have a phenomenal recruiting year. Justin says he thinks Georgia is not better than last year. That's his opinion. Jeff says their offense always had the ball last year. Yeah, I think they're very good. I think I don't know how we're going to stop their tight ends. I think, and we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I'm a realist. And it's like I said, JC, here's one way, and whether this is the right way or not, do you think Florida has a player that could start for the Georgia Bulldogs?
Yeah, I do.
Who?
I think Miller could. Yeah, I think Miller could.
I think the only one that could would might be Osiris Torrance.
Who's our defensive back that picked off the ball against LSU? He's pretty damn good too.
Everybody's just bashing our defensive back. So
I know, but you said there was a kid, Mark. What's his name? It's just escaping me. The guy who picked off the ball against LSU that got called back on the
Jaden Hill.
Huh?
Jaden Hill. Hill.
No, not Jaden Hill. It's Jay. It's just starts with Jay. I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank. He picked off the ball against LSU.
Jaden Hill's one of our corners.
Right, but he picked off the ball.
LSU didn't throw any interceptions.
LSU.
Oh, you're talking about Marshall Jr. He's very good. He might be able to start.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about.
Jason Marshall Jr. JC.
Yes, Jason Marshall. That's who I'm talking about. So those are two that
fans aren't real happy with him. I try to tell them he's a good player, but they don't believe it.
Well, so those would be the two guys on defense that I say could start for Georgia. Maybe Cox, maybe, and then on offense, and then we can run the football.
Brenton Cox, he left Georgia because he couldn't start for them.
Well,
he used to play for Georgia.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, regardless, we talked enough about that game. We'll see how it plays out. I hope it's good weather. It's supposed to rain. We'll see.
Run the football.
How bad the rain's going to be.
Florida's got to run the football. That's all they're going to do. So.
Well, we got to gain yards. So, anyway.
It's easier to run the football when you have a semblance of a passing. I mean, if you have a threat to throw the ball accurately, it's easier to run the football. I don't know if Florida has that. But
no, they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
are you excited for the World Series, JC?
World Series? No, I'm not. Are you?
I'll watch it. I like the Astros. I think they're a very good baseball team. I like baseball.
I'd say, since you brought up the Astros for whatever reason, while we're talking about Florida, Georgia, I would say that the Astros do one thing better than I think any team in Major League Baseball. And the one thing that they do better is it seems like they hit really good pitches, and they are clutch at the plate with 2 strikes. Garrett Cole threw some really good pitches at them that they were able to put in play, and with 2 strikes. Houston is clutch at the plate. I think Philadelphia is going to have to pitch as well or better than they have in the entire season to win this. But I'm not saying they can't do it. Look at what they did to the Braves. Look at, and remember, Philadelphia came within an out or two of possibly losing in the first round of the Cardinals, but they got some breaks. Their pitching is what's kept them going. They've had some clutch hits, of course, Bryce Harper, home runs, so forth. But it's been Zach Wheeler, and it's been their starting pitching that has kept them alive. And they're going to need that. But Houston meets their strength very well because they hit very good pitches that hit corners that go high low. Houston can put the ball in play as well as anybody I've seen in a long, long time. That's going to be a problem if you want the Phillies to win.
Are you in the market to buy or sell your home, darling? We'd be a realtor with Caldwell Banker. We'll provide you a fast, friendly, reliable service. Call her today at 352-562-1411. Help your dreams come true. Speaking with JC on the Titan More Hotline, Marissa says on Facebook Live, she says, I think if Jacksonville throws down some G's, the game has a chance. I don't know what G's are. Jax has to make it lucrative for the Dogs. Both teams get the same amount of money.
Well,
I don't think this game is not staying in Jacksonville.
It's not going to be about money because the schools are going to get more money than they've ever gotten in their history when this TV contract is negotiated. It's not going to be about that. It's going to be about whether Kirby wants his recruits to watch the game in Athens. He doesn't want to buy and leave some tickets at will call for guys to show up. They can't even talk to the guys when it's in Jack. He wants to put these guys in Sanford Stadium to see them play the Gators. That's what he wants, and that's what he's going to get. And so, look, again, if you guys miss Jacksonville that much, go lobby Scott Strickland to play the game in Jacksonville, but it won't happen. But you can do it if you want to. So, we'll see. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, it's not. I wanted to bring this up. Andy brought it up. Texas A&M suspended 3 of their prize 4 5-star freshmen. Maybe we didn't want that. Did you see where they were smoking pot in the locker room before the South Carolina game, Jason?
He's losing control, dude. He's losing control, and I did see that. It's an embarrassment. I don't know. I think he is losing control of that team. You can just see with the way they play. And I feel, more than anything, I feel sorry for is Devon Achane. He is a first-round NFL draft pick. If he's got any brains, he'll get out of there as fast as he can and go to the draft and make millions of dollars. He's their best player, and he's being wasted on a trash offense run by a coach who's losing control of the team. He couldn't control Jameis Winston, but he let Jameis Winston play. He could have suspended Jameis Winston I don't know how many times, but he let the guy play. And it was because Jameis Winston represented the only chance he had to win a national championship. And so he let him play, screw the morals and everything else and the discipline. That's what it was about for John James Fisher. And now John James Fisher is having trouble keeping that team together. And before you know it, the transfer portal will be flush with A&M players. My recommendation would be if Billy wants to get some of these guys to come here, screen them hard. But there's a lot of talent on that roster. And John James is going to have to start rebuilding it again because they're a mess. They could easily finish 7-5 this year, and that would be completely unacceptable to that fan base.
Well, 7-5 would be a miracle if they do that.
They got some home games.
They're 3-4 right now.
Yeah, I mean they'd have to win 4 games. Maybe they'll go 6-6, but either one is unacceptable to that fan base and that administration with what they're invested in with John James Fisher. So John James Fisher's better figure it out. And I guess he did what he had to do with these idiots that were getting stoned before the game at South Carolina. And just the opposite of that is the guy who's probably underpaid in Shane Beamer. And Shane Beamer is the guy you have to look at very seriously for possible Coach of the Year honors because South Carolina will likely beat Missouri this weekend. They could easily come down here and win. They could give Clemson all they want, and that team could win 8 games. Now think about that. So that's a guy that you have to really admire for what he's doing with what little he has to work with. And I have to give South Carolina right now the surprise team of the SEC.
Daryl says here on Facebook Live, we can use A&M's half of their 2022 class in the portal. What you think? I mean, they got some good players. It's going to be interesting to see because, they paid all those kids. Do they have to give money back if they leave? I don't even know how any of that works, but it's crazy to me that kids are smoking weed in a locker room before a game. Now, I've been in locker rooms in my pros in my early years. Those old guys would be smoking at halftime in the bathroom, smoking cigarettes, but they weren't smoking weed.
No. Len Dawson.
It's a mess there.
Len Dawson smoked cigarettes on the sideline for the Chiefs in the playoffs. I mean, it's just, but it is a disaster in College Station. And John James Fisher is the guy who has to take the hit because he's the coach.
Do you think they get rid of him?
They will not because they're too invested. He's got that safety net of about $85 to $90 million.
Right, but I really don't think that money even bothers those folks at A&M.
Well, listen, I mean, there's a lot of money in Texas. If they really wanted to pay money and do the right thing, they would have paid off the Big 12 and gotten out of there. Do you know, QB, and I'm going to bring up something else, Oklahoma State in that game against Texas had 0 penalties for 0 yards. Texas had 14 penalties for 119 yards. And, when Texas calls the Big 12 office, wherever that is, Dallas, Houston, whatever, and complains about that discrepancy, I don't think anybody's going to take the call. So if money is not an object, pay off the damn contract and let's go to the SEC. Well, the problem with that is I don't think the SEC is ready for Texas or Oklahoma. So what I mean by that is they're not.
Well, no. They may not be ready from a logistics standpoint, but
right.
I don't think OU and Texas are ready to play those schedules week in and week out.
From a logistics standpoint, I agree. Southeastern Conference is not ready for that yet. They're working on it. But think about that, QB. 0 penalties. So Oklahoma State essentially played a perfect game discipline-wise.
That is impossible.
That's impossible, right?
That's impossible.
So don't you think there's something fishy going on in the Big 12? And then speaking of Texas, Ewers had a 38% pass completion percentage against Oklahoma State. So we need to pump the brakes a little bit on him. And Sark forgot to run the ball. Speaking of a team that forgot to run the ball that should have won the other day, Syracuse gave Sean Tucker the ball 5 times. You know how many yards he had? 54 yards. He averaged almost 11 yards a carry, and Dino forgot to give him the football against Clemson, especially in the second half. He also received a touchdown pass on a wheel route in the first half, and yet they forgot to give Sean Taylor their best player the ball. Sometimes these coaches lose track of what they're doing in these games, and that's why they lose. And I think that's one of the reasons why Syracuse lost to Clemson. It's terrible. But in terms of what happened in Oklahoma State against Texas, that's just a travesty. It's a travesty.
Yeah, I agree. Justin says on Facebook Live, brought to you by Mellon Law, how about our baseball and softball teams coming in ranked number 1 and number 4 preseason? The only school in the country to have both in the top 5.
Sounds like it could be a good spring around here. That's how I'd say that.
Gene says on Facebook Live, if you were playing the drink every time JC says John James Fisher at home, you would be unconscious right now.
Well, God bless Gene. He's one of our favorite listeners. I listen. That's the guy's name. His name is John James Fisher, so that's what I'm going to call him, John Fisher. That's his name.
Oh, I think they're going to get rid of Jimbo. The more I think about it.
Well, that's a very expensive price tag. But look, Dan Mullen's over there making $1 million, $2 million on ESPN now. He's going to be their main guy. Florida's paying him. I mean, these guys are geniuses. They do what they want. They get paid by who they get paid by, and they basically, I got to think about this, QB. I don't want to say this the wrong way. I don't want people to think that I'm not a Billy Napier guy. I do like Billy Napier. But don't you think maybe they pulled the trigger on Mullen a little too quickly, or do you think that was the right call? I mean, just because he hasn't been able to,
Well, it wasn't so much recruiting. It was kind of, I'm not going to go as far as what's going on in A&M in their locker room. The locker room was a mess. You know what I mean? The culture, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
Disaster. And it wasn't getting any better. Was the recruiting part of it? Yes. Dan can call plays for sure. Chris says Dan Mullen will go to A&M. Wouldn't that be great? But $85 million buyout or whatever it is not a lot for Texas A&M. I mean, it is a lot of money. But I guarantee you, if they lose to Ole Miss this week,
yeah,
I think they have to do something. I mean, but look, kudos to his agent. I think it's Jimmy Sexton. Jimmy Sexton is making so much money off these coaches getting fired. It's crazy.
Well, listen, these guys, they are on the favorable end of all contracts that are written these days with these schools. And I don't know if that's got to change or not, but it's almost getting to the point of absurdity. It really is. And here's the thing I would say is that maybe Florida did the right thing by letting Mullen go. But Mullen, admittedly didn't have a lot of his own guys on campus playing football games. He was playing with mostly McElwain's guys when he was successful.
But he won then.
Now, QB, here's a question for you, and you'll get the answer because we're talking about it. But the question is, here's a trivia question you can thrill all your friends up in Jacksonville with. Who was the coach of the first number 1 rated team in the first ever college football playoff rankings?
It was the school?
what was the school and who was the coach of the first ever college football playoffs rankings #1 team in when it started?
Mississippi State.
It was, and Dan Mullen was the coach, and 2014.
And then that team ended up with like 3 losses.
Yeah, they did. They lost. They lost to Alabama. They then lost to Ole Miss, and then they lost in the Orange Bowl to Georgia Tech. That's how it ended in 2014. But that's a trivia question. I don't think anybody will get. But listen, I don't know. I'm not trying to go backwards. I want to go forward. I know Billy's trying to do something special here. He's got the facilities he needs now, and he's got to get these players. Look, this is going to be the worst roster that Billy Napier coaches during his tenure here at Florida for however long it's going to last. I believe that because I believe he's going to improve the roster in the transfer portal first and foremost, and with recruiting, and the roster is going to get better. But I did hear Dan Mullen say yesterday. He says that Florida's got enough talent on this roster to stay with Georgia, and I was a little bit confused by that because I don't see where he sees that talent, but we'll see. I mean, that's what he said. So
JC, real quick before we let you go, Daniel says on Facebook Live, couldn't A&M fire Jimbo with calls? He's losing control.
Well, he would have to break something contractually on, to have cause. I mean, there would have to be something that he does that goes against the legalities or the nature of his contract. And suspending kids smoking pot does not include that. He would have to do something else, and that could be a problem. But that's not what we're talking about here. He's not going to sacrifice $90 million and do something silly. And look, A&M is not going to get rid of him. I just don't see it because of that. Win or lose against Mississippi. If they go 6-6, win or lose, he'll be on the hot seat maybe next year. But I can't see them making a move this year. He's had some problems at quarterback. They're going to give him time to try to fix that. If he can't do it, then he'll be released. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, JC, we'll talk to you on Friday. We got to head and get to Mike Morgan.
Mike Morgan. Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you.
That's JC. Join us on the Tight Number Hotline. Take a quick time out. Come back. Will be Mike Morgan from ESPN. You're watching and listening to Pot Up Matthews in the Morning.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise. QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogra State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wiebe Realtor Caldwell Banker MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Adams Rib Company, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteaks, MB Listing, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Avra and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Cube Billiards and Sports Bar. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, visit potupwithshane.com and click the Advertise button. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the show. If you like what we are doing here, make sure you follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Welcome back to the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Celebration points where the Gators go to celebrate with premium brands like the Keys Bar and Grill, Medici's, Regal Cinemas, Dave & Buster's, Nike, Le Macaron, the Gadget Guys, the HBC's Restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. Now selling head beer, Coach American Lager at Spurrier's, Visors, and Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. We'll see you at Celebration Point where the Gators go to celebrate. We're now going to head back to the Titan MRI Hotline, and we're joined by ESPN's Mike Morgan. Good morning, Mike. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing well. I always get a little bit envious of JC setup. He always looks like he's doing it from like a pool. I'm back with some family in South Florida before I head up to Virginia for the Miami-Virginia game in a couple days on ESPN radio. But it's nice to be back in the Sunshine State for a few days. Kind of snuck it here in the middle of game week. And, Shane, I always love this segment. You always pepper me with great questions. It's a good give and take. But being Florida-Georgia week, I got to come out of the gate with a question for you, because I know, okay, I know, you're a Mississippi guy, Mississippi native, right? And the thing I remember about my time at Florida is that, growing up in Florida, all my buddies had to make a tough choice. It was Florida or Florida State. And so needless to say, there was a lot of give and take, a lot of trash talk with friends of mine, lifelong friends, some of which became quick enemies, that went to Florida State, and some went to Miami, but most if you picked an in-state school, it was Florida State. Now, at the time, Florida State was such a great battle. And so Steve had to reprogram people like me to understand that it was Georgia that was the biggest rival and not Florida State. And I'm wondering, when you came to Gainesville and Steve became the coach and all that, how did he indoctrinate you to say, look, Shane, this is how it is around here. We got a lot of big games on the schedule, but this is the one that means most to me?
Well, that's a great question, because, I still have a hard time after being a Gator for 30-something years. I still feel like the Florida State game is the biggest rivalry game, because I didn't grow up here where people hate Georgia. I grew up with the Egg Bowl, where Ole Miss hates Mississippi State hates Ole Miss. So I think if you ask the players in the Spurrier era, they would say Florida State's the biggest rival game, just because both teams were always usually in the top 5 or top 10, and it was a bloodbath.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was 11-1 as the head coach, but when he took the job, he just basically said, look, we're going to find a way to beat Georgia, because we want to win SEC titles. And obviously, to do that, you had to beat them as one of your rivalry games. So, now, Mike, I mentioned this earlier on my show. I got so many friends that have been texting me all week saying, now I know what it was like being a Georgia fan in the 90s. Because we're struggling and not expected to win the game. So it's a huge game. It's a great, I don't know how many more years. I don't know when the contract in Jacksonville runs out, but it looks like it's going to go home and home. I love this game. Had a lot of success, never lost, and just hammered them pretty much every game except my senior year when they were the better team. We beat them. JC thinks we're going to keep it close. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because I don't think we can, but anything can happen. But to answer your question, Spurrier hated Georgia. I don't know his record as a player right offhand. I don't think he had a lot of success as a player against the Dogs either. That's another reason why he hated them so much. So,
I understand it from your
question.
Yeah, it's just, that was really tough. I can tell you as a student, it was tough to convince the student body at the time in the 90s that Georgia was a bigger game than Florida State. And part of it was, quite honestly, we expected, we expected you guys to roll Georgia, and did more times than not. And Florida State was just, oh man, that hatred was real. Like, that was just a different level. And again, maybe it's the different provinces of Florida, right? If I grew up in Jacksonville, obviously I would understand maybe a little better the hatred of Georgia as compared to Florida State. But I grew up in the southern part of the state, and at that time, Florida State, Miami were all legitimate top 10 programs at the same time. And so you kind of felt like you had to be the best in the state, and the rest would take care of itself. And obviously all that has changed. I mentioned I've got Miami this week. They're a mess right now. Florida State has been a mess, and obviously it's well documented, some of the issues that Florida has had. I never thought we'd ever get to this point with these three programs all struggling to be good again. And then here's Georgia, that seemed like they could never make it to that next level under Mark Richt. And even in the first years under Kirby, I can tell you, living in Atlanta, there are a lot of Georgia fans that were piling on the criticism of Kirby Smart. It wasn't a marriage made in heaven right away, believe me. But now, of course, he's got it rolling. And when you have it rolling like this, it's hard to be knocked off the perch. Everybody does get knocked off eventually. I mean, look at where Texas is. Look at where Southern Cal has been. All these programs that you think are too good to fail, they have failed and failed big time. And it can happen to Georgia at some point. But it just seems like right now the momentum is so strong that it's hard to envision a dip anytime soon with the program, at least a big one. They're going to have an off year. I mean, they're going to have a 9-3 at some point, but I don't know if they're going back to 7-5 anytime soon.
No, not at all. So, Mike, you're going to be on the call for Miami, Virginia this week. Gosh, what in the world are they going to do down there with the Miami Hurricanes? Obviously, Mario, they're losing to teams they should not be losing to at all.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're losing recruits. We know during the summertime they were, big NIL deals to go to Miami.
Right.
From your pregame prep, can Miami salvage this season at all?
Well, they're just trying to get. They'll tell you that they're competing for the Coastal, because the Coastal Division, if you follow the ACC, that's the weaker of the two, and that's the one where a bunch of different teams have won it. And so, from that standpoint, they're mathematically alive to still win their division. But I think, honestly, if you're Mario, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I got some. I've been delivered a bit of a mess here. Although they finished the season last year hotter than a firecracker, and Tyler Van Dyke, everybody was talking about him as a first-round draft pick quarterback. He gets dinged up in the last game. The backup comes in as a former Southern Cal quarterback, a portal guy, and he fumbles the ball 3 times. It's like, how do you do that as a quarterback? That's pretty hard to do. And then throws a couple picks. They turn it over 8 times, Shane. 8 times against Duke. So I think they're just trying to make the most of this year, and then he's selling everybody on the fact, just like Billy Napier, just like all these first-year coaches are. Hey, look, we're changing the culture. We got a big recruiting class coming in. Give it time, and I promise you, we're going to turn this puppy around, but it's not going to happen overnight. Like, the message is the same everywhere you go, and you as a fan base, you want to believe that. The nightmare scenario is what you're seeing in College Station, which is where 5 years later, it hadn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse with Jimbo Fisher. So you could change the culture, and you can get a bunch of stars next to recruits, and you can sell it. It doesn't mean it's going to turn around just because that happens.
Speaking of College Station, I was getting ready to bring them up. Now there's reports of guys being suspended for smoking pot in the locker room before a game. Sounds like he's lost control. It looks like that just watching the games from him on the sideline. Mike, what are they going to do there? Will they buy him? Will they buy him out? Are they going to give him a couple?
No, you can't. It's not just like people always say. Well, I don't know if they can buy him out because the price tag would be so high. It's not just because of that. If you bail on Jimbo now, again, every time you do that, you do hit the reset button, and it's not that easy to just recycle coaches every few years. You get into that pattern, then you start looking like Tennessee did for 15 years. Like, I don't think you can go that route. And you had everybody convinced that this was the guy. This was not just a hire. This was the savior. So if you fire him now, I think that creates more problems than it solves. I think he's going to be around next year. I do think that they are going to be better. They have talent. There's no question, but so many of that elite talent are freshmen, and they got to go ahead and let that mature over time. And then the other thing he's got to do is he's got to be successful on his quarterback searches, because he hasn't been so far. He inherited Kellen Mond, who I didn't think ever got better, sophomore to junior to senior year. He fell in love with Haynes King. He gets Max Johnson in the portal. Like, he's got to find the guy. And so far, he has not been able to do that. You had it for 2 years in Tallahassee with Jameis Winston. But outside of that, I don't know if Jimbo has had a a true franchise quarterback. He's going to have to find one at some point. And if he does that, and if he can figure out what kind of plays to call on offense, which is supposed to be his specialty, his calling card, then they're going to get talent. They're going to have talent, and they're going to have enough to win games. I just think this year got off to a rough start, and it has snowballed. But I honestly don't think there is any chance you pull the ripcord on Jimbo after this year. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't either. But boy, it's bad, and it's shocking to me how bad they are on offense. I mean, I'm all about easy completions to get your guys going. It's like they can't even get an easy completion when you watch them play. Let's talk about, speaking of easy completions, Tennessee. It's all about being at the right place at the right time and finding that guy. I mean, think about what Josh Heupel has done in 2 years. When he took over that job, Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer, was his quarterback for the first 3 or 4 games. He switches to Hendon Hooker, and the rest is history. What if Hendon Hooker wasn't on that Tennessee roster? What if Hendon Hooker didn't transfer to Tennessee?
Mm-hmm.
Where would Tennessee be? That one player can turn that whole program around.
Especially if that one player is a quarterback. And again, Hooker's an interesting story in that in 2020, he got a bad case of COVID. I don't know if that really affected his play. It apparently had some effect on him. He did not play well at all in Blacksburg, lost the job. Comes to Tennessee, was only supposed to be a backup in a lot of respects. And lo and behold, you've got the best deep ball thrower in the league. You got a guy that seems to have a great head on his shoulders, a son of a quarterback at North Carolina A&T. A&T, I guess. I'm throwing the phone company in there. Nice little sponsorship. But I just think that I've talked about this on the podcast. This is the year of redemption for so many people, so many coaches, players, and programs. Bo Nix, look at what he's doing at Oregon. Auburn fans couldn't wait to get rid of him. Tennessee football has been a dumpster fire for 15 years. Josh Heupel was a guy that I know UCF fans that were not in love with Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel was not a hot name on the coaching path, but that's who Tennessee wound up getting because they swung and missed on another guy or two, and Danny White had a relationship with Josh, obviously at UCF. But go back and read Tennessee fans' comments when that hire was made. You couldn't find 5 of them that were excited about that hire. So, sometimes it's better to be a little bit lucky than good. And they have struck gold on Josh Heupel, who clearly has gotten better. Remember, this was a guy who got fired by his alma mater as the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Okay? I mean, it's not as if Josh Heupel was this instant brainchild, this mastermind on offense, but give him credit. Coaches, just like players, peak at different levels. He's figured out something different that works. He wasn't running the same offense 5-10 years ago, but he has stumbled upon this. He's got it working to perfection. The players love it. It seems, Shane, I mean, you would know this better than I. It seems like it's simplified enough where everybody gets it and nobody seems to be overwhelmed by it. And sometimes that offense is better than a 300-page playbook that just overwhelms your average 19, 20-year-old.
We got a couple of Facebook Lives here for you. First one is, Tony wants to know, how disappointing is UVA this season? More of a surprise than Miami, in his opinion. Their quarterback was he is legit, but he's bad. Yeah, I mean, Brennan Armstrong in our game will probably go over 10,000 total yards. He can run, he can throw. He's broken just about every Virginia passing record. I had him last year on a Friday night game at Wake Forest. He played well, but he was outmatched by Sam Hartman, who's just a better college player, and they're obviously a better college program at this point. They've got stud wide receivers. They've got one of the problems is they had to replace literally all 5 offensive linemen. So they got offensive line issues, and then they're trying to learn under a new head coach, Tony Elliott. I was shocked when Brock Obendenhall
just retired at a thin blue air. It was not like he was on the hot seat. He just one day just decided, you know what, I'm done. And I really think that set Virginia back, because I think Bronco was a good fit for them and would have continued to progress with that program. But you bring in Elliott from Clemson, and they've been a disappointment. It's hard to figure, because Armstrong and Van Dyke at the beginning of the year were considered two of the top quarterbacks in the country, and neither one of them have had a good season thus far.
That's true. At Chris Storing Mortgage, they do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Storing Mortgage today at 352-244-0840. Speaking with Mike Morgan, a few more minutes with him on the Titan More Hotline. Andy asked, Mike, is it conceivable that the SEC gets 3 in the playoffs if Bama, Tennessee, and Georgia each have 1 loss and TCU and Clemson have a loss? I don't know who's going to be Clemson, but TCU could have a loss. But, I mean, it's possible to get all 3.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll happen, but those are 3. Bama, Georgia, and Tennessee are outstanding football teams.
It is conceivable, yes. I don't think it's probable. I mean, he's got the right scenario, right? Like Georgia beats Tennessee, and then Alabama beats Georgia, and then all 3 wind up having really, really good resumes, good enough to get in there. But I just think, first off, you've got 2 teams in the Big Ten that there's going to be a lot of hype with. Like Ohio State and Clemson are only going to play once. And the loser of that game is likely only going to have 1 loss. So you'll have that. You brought up who's going to beat Clemson. If Clemson goes undefeated, they're probably in. I don't think TCU runs the table. I think Oklahoma State gets them in a rematch in the Big 12 title game. But if TCU did run the table, then they certainly would get in. The Big 12 has some street cred this year in my mind that they've earned. But yeah, if there's a bunch of 1 losses and 3 of them are SEC teams, you're going to have strong arguments. I still think, remember now, these aren't computers making that decision. These are 13 people in a room. And those 13 people, whether they want to admit it or not, don't want 3 teams from one conference. They just don't think it's good. And I really think if we're splitting hairs, and at that point that's what we'd be doing, I think they would find a way to make sure that the SEC only has 2, and maybe we're looking at SEC, Big Ten each have 2, or somehow somebody like a Clemson goes undefeated and they would be the other team.
Mike, we'll talk next week's a huge weekend in the SEC with Tennessee, Georgia, and LSU, Alabama. Let's talk about LSU. I thought, JC and I do our picks. I picked LSU to win because I didn't think Ole Miss was a top 10 team. They hadn't played anybody. But LSU is playing really good. They're playing really good football right now. Do you give them much of a chance next week against Alabama?
I do, because I think Jaden Daniels is now playing at a different level. Like I think he now has control of that offense, and he's not just beating you with his legs. He's not just scrambling all over the place. Like, he's making big time throws. The defense is real, and Alabama. Let's face it, Alabama's a flawed team. Every time I say that, I get a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, because I know I'm going up against Darth Vader and Nick Saban, and when I say that, it's typically when he just dunks on you and says, "Oh yeah, you think we're down? How do you like me now?" So I don't want to fall into that trap. But they're not the same Alabama teams that we've seen before. The penalties, I'd like to say, can be cleaned up, but I don't know, Shane. We're in late October. If you're a highly penalized team now, how often you see a highly penalized team in late October all of a sudden just clean it up mysteriously in November? Not usually. And then they don't have a dominating running back. They don't have a dominating, really dominating receiving core, the likes of which we've seen in the past. And their defense continually has breakdowns. So, yeah, I think that could be a good game. I really do. I was like you. I wasn't buying Ole Miss. I thought LSU would win that game. I've talked about before that while some people, for whatever reason, hate Brian Kelly, I think he's a damn good coach. And I think he'll have his team ready to play that game.
Oh, this is a good one. Mike, will Hugh Freeze be coaching at a big-name school next year, or is he stuck at Liberty?
Boy, we were just talking about that on the pod. I mean, think about this now. If you're Auburn, how do you not do everything you can to get him? Like, I mean, the guy flat out coaches offense, and the recruiting, remember now, the recruiting that they got busted doing in today's day and age of NIL, he can do all that. I mean, he can call those same people and go ahead and, tag some sponsorship to it. And before you know it, they're getting some big time recruits again in Oxford. In Auburn. If he can recruit in Oxford, then I think he can recruit at Auburn, right? I mean, I think most people would tell you Oxford would be a little bit more difficult to recruit than Auburn, Alabama, which has had more winning tradition here, particularly in the last 20 years. So I don't know how that's not, I mean, again, I'm not on message boards, and I'm not talking to a bunch of Auburn fans, and I don't know Mr. Yellowwood and all the banking guys over there from Alabama, but that he has to be on their radar. Now, I know that a lot of people will scoff at that, and I don't know if the SEC office would be happy with that. But perhaps enough time has passed where Hugh Freeze gets another shot in this league. And if he does, that's my guess. If not, somebody else is going to hire that man. I mean, I just, again, I'm not here to tell you he's a great human being, a bad human. All I know is what he's done. You look at it, what he did at Ole Miss and what he's doing now at Liberty. And by the way, they've got Arkansas next week. He could knock off an SEC team and make some real headlines if he does that. So, yeah, I think he's going to be have a Power 5 job here before long.
Yep. Last thing before we let you go, Mike, how do you see the Florida-Georgia game playing out?
Well, look, I mean, you hit on the biggest thing. It's like how many Florida players would start on Georgia, right? I mean, that's so you know what you're up against here. So basically, what you're hoping in a game like this is that intangibles take over. I think I heard somewhere where 5 of the last 7 Florida coaches won their first Florida-Georgia game. I'm sure that number's slightly off, but in other words, there were some. Yeah, take a look at that. Make sure where that stat actually is at. It might not be 5 of 7, but the point is that a lot of Florida teams that weren't great still found a way to beat Georgia. It wasn't all Spurrier and Urban Meyer. There was some. I think pretty sure Ron Zook in year 1 beat Georgia. McElwain, I believe, had a win against Georgia. Muschamp. Yeah, I think if you go back, like there have been some Florida teams that weren't exactly gangbusters that did win this game. That's why Georgia fans, I know, will never take it for granted. They've seen the movie too many times where they've had the better squad and they've lost. That being said, this Georgia team, I agree with you on offense. I think they're better. I don't think they're as good defensively, but they're still good enough, and they're still a damn good team, and I don't think Florida's there yet. So Florida has to, it's the same old cliche. You gotta get help. You gotta get turnovers. Georgia has to make mistakes. Florida has to have Richardson has to have the game of his life. All those things have to happen. But when you start doing the what if game, what if we can have this and this and this? And eventually you got to come to the realization that Georgia's just a better team and they should win the game.
Yep. Mike, great stuff as always. Let everybody know how they can listen to your podcast.
Yeah, real simple. JC and Morgan, myself, JC Sherbert, who used to work on the recruiting beat for ESPN, still does a great job covering things, all things college football. We drop it every Tuesday. It's on every platform. JC and Morgan, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, free of charge. Be more than happy to have you check it out. And we love all Gator listeners. Got a lot of Gator fans that listen as well. And we talk a ton of Florida and SEC and everybody else on there.
Good stuff, my man. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.
Shane, always enjoy it. Enjoy this weekend in Jacksonville.
Should be fun. That's Mike Morgan from ESPN. Join us on the Titan More hotline. Going to get one text on the Titan More text line and get out of here. Matt from Mariana says, I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I would love to have seen Hugh Freeze as the Florida coach. He's a good football coach. That would have never happened, though, because the motto of the University of Florida Athletic Association is winning championships with integrity. So Ruse Ogre State Farm Office is a team of dedicated insurance professionals ready to help life go right with the right insurance options for you and your family. Visit ogreinsurance.com. Give them a call at 352-240-1779. Hope everybody enjoyed today's program. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Take care.